Hello and welcome to Audio Gyan, an Indian podcast for those interested in design, philosophy, and arts. Audio Gyan documents thoughts, ideas, and insights from known and unknown gems of India who have done some remarkable work in their field of interest. Visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. This podcast is brought to you in association with Culture Shop. For those who are not aware of it, Culture Shop is a platform for some of the top cutting-edge Indian graphic artists from around the world offering affordable art and quality lifestyle products reflecting the new India. AudioGyan along with Culture Shop in this new season will be interviewing some of these brilliantly talented artists from India. Do check out cultureshop.in or visit their physical store in Bandra and newly opened in Kalagoda. Alright, so welcome to AudioGyan. Today I have Meera Malhotra with us. She's an artist associated with Culture Shop. Meera is a Mumbai-based visual artist and graphic designer and founder of Studio Cole. Her personal work is essentially Indian, witty and contemporary, characterized by her visceral use of line. A postgraduate from NID and BFA in Applied Arts, Meera's rare approach to design is rooted in logic and common sense, but enriched by her distinct aesthetic and creative flair. Her work has been featured by Curious, Red Bull Premiers and VH1 and has represented India in Triennale Museum, Milan and South Bank Centre, London. So thank you, Meera, for giving us your time and welcome to AudioGyan.
Thank you for having me, Kedar.
Yeah. So today's discussion we'll try and understand like how you became an artist and slightly deep dive into art illustration in general. So the first thing which I wanted to ask you is probably we can start off with like your introduction, right? So how did you become an artist and so what is Studio Cole also about?
Okay, so I started off, I was always interested in art as a young kid, and I luckily have very supportive parents. Mm-hmm. So we are a family of we're always interested in the arts and humanities. Mm-hmm. So we are actually four siblings, 4 kids. Mm-hmm. And it's a family of 6 basically. Oh. And all of us are somewhat interested, like my sister is interested in literature. My brother is a musician who plays with orchestras all over the place. Like there's a lot of stuff he does also. He's a multi-instrumentalist, and I was into art. So I was always interested in drawing at a very early age. My parents were most delighted by that. They weren't like, engineering, medicine. They were not at all like that. So I was always encouraged to draw. I was given drawing books. My parents used to buy me books whenever I went out, and they would show me the illustration and things like that. So I got very interested in that, and they were very happy with my decision to become, an artist. So it's around maybe 7th or 8th standard or grade in school that my cousin, who also was an art director in Trikaya Grey at the time, she told me that, you can make a career of this. And I had never thought of career at that age. But when she told me this, I was like, okay. This is getting real now. Shit is getting real. And that's when I started. And so then, your usual intermediate exam and all those things, all those entrance exams I took. And eventually I got into applied art. So applied art was all I knew really. That like, okay, meaning our idea was like, art means fine art, that kind of thing. And slowly I kind of wanted more from that experience or that educational experience, where I was like, there has to be something more to this. We have to have more of a concept in our work, or there has to be something more than just skill, I think. So I started working once I was out of applied arts. Okay. And I was in a variety of jobs, and at that time the industry was very advertising oriented. Yeah. So it was like advertising or nothing 10, else. 12 years back? This is like 2006, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So around 11 years ago. Yeah. So it was all about that, and illustration was also like on the horizon. And if you're in a applied arts college, illustration is a big deal for if you're an illustrator, you're like a god walking in college, so there was that thing that okay, you can draw, it's good, but when you go out in the industry, there's actually very few options for that kind of thing, or it's all skill based. So that's when I started like thinking like I need something more. I need to have my own vision, you know, that kind of thing. So I worked for around 2-3 years, and I was like, I worked in editorial, I worked in advertising, and after advertising especially, I was like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. That's when I was like, let me consider more options. So I consider a lot of foreign options, but being Kangal, I straight went to NID, and anyway, I'm very glad I did that because it's a very Indian-centric course, and I think that made a big difference to me. So that's where I ended up, and in NID you're exposed to so much. So we learned strategy, we learned, you know, system design, we learned about folk arts, and what, you know, you realize that you're seeing all these things, but you don't understand what they're about, or where they come from, or what culture they emanate from. And all that exposure made a very big difference. I did a lot of social good projects. So Studio Cole is kind of, I would say, like an image making endeavor. I'm not saying we are the best at image making, I'm saying we are learning, but we do it with an understanding of what has come from our culture. So we do a lot of other stuff that's apart from image making, sometimes just to make ends meet. But we are interested in image making as a way of speaking to people. So I think a lot of people in India, like studios right now, are interested in typography, and that's great. We just don't do that. You know, we do other things. Or maybe we do branding. I think the idea of a visual language, for example, is very interesting. It goes beyond just, you know, saying that, oh, I'm into typography or I'm into illustration. It's a language, so it can be across mediums, you know, across disciplines in that way. So I like that. I like that idea of branding. So we do a lot of branding, we do a lot of work for social good, and we do a lot of illustration. So it's an odd mix, but I enjoy it because it's challenging all the time. It's not like, you know, I put my blinkers on and I'm only looking at one kind of thing. So that's what Studio Cole is about. We've been like, I think, doing this for 5-6 years or so. So yeah, it's very small, 2 of us only right now. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, so like getting to the topic of the day, which is illustration. So like I would like to begin with asking what is the characteristics of being identified as a unique illustrator. I mean, every illustration has different styles, right? So how and people are like, artists are known through their work also, like there are different strokes, so they use, so like what are those, can you slightly tell in detail what are those characteristics?
So this is a kind of elusive style that everybody wants a style. It's a very elusive thing to want, like, you know, because it takes a lot of practice to get to that. I think some people do say, like, say for my work, they say we can see that there's a style, but I still don't think that I have like a very discernible style. But yes, you can say like, okay, I know Meera did this. I think it's got a lot to do with use of, say, color is one thing. So there are, like, if you see some illustrators, they use only black and white. And that is already one telling sign that it is their work. Some people use thick and thin line, like a varied line. Some people use line like a solid line that doesn't change its variation. It's just a same width throughout. Some people don't use line at all. They just use flat shapes. Do you use texture in your work? Do you not use texture in your work? What kind of colors do you use? Like earthy colors, jewel colors, pop colors. Even further than that, we can say what kind of content. I think this matters even more, you know. What is the content of your illustration? Are they abstract shapes? Are they is it like representational art? Is it something that you see and you replicate? And if you do see something, like if I see a set of drawers, for example, how do I take that set of drawers and make it my own so that people know that I drew it? That the way I approached that, you know, that exercise, I could draw it completely realistically, or I could take it through my lens and, you know, filter it out and it becomes something else. So if you see like Picasso's work, a lot of that is is, you can see that, okay, he's deconstructed shapes or he's deconstructed the face, that kind of thing. So I think that is what really gives you your style. And content wise, speaking further about content, I think it's also like what do you want to deal with? Are you talking about women's lib in your, like, I've seen a lot of new Instagram artists who deal with women and the concerns of women, and they only draw women,
Okay.
or are you thinking about are you putting surreal elements in your artwork where two unrelated objects are joined together by your imagination or what you've put down on paper. So all of these speak and give a certain message. And because medium and message are related, as we saw in a previous podcast, I think that also adds to what is portrayed. So if you say if you want to put a spin on something, say, that's very depressing, but you want to make it seem happier, you can put happier colors, and then it automatically it goes towards, I mean, just giving an example, but it can actually be fashioned to that thing. You won't take something that is depressing and usually put those colors. So if you do it, then you're breaking a rule, and then you're breaking the rule very you should be breaking the rule at least very consciously, that I'm using these colors to this effect. So all that plays into what is the style of an artist.
Does material play into this?
Oh yeah, so even the medium, like if you use oil paint, I think if you read essays by John Berger, he talks about oil painting being sort of in a certain school of thought of like an acquisition of wealth, for example. So he talks about that particular medium starting to signify that over time. I can't remember exactly what the essay is about, but it talks about paintings as wealth, or depictions of my wealth. So you'd see a lot of patrons earlier, and in like 17th, 18th century, I think, I'm not sure of the time frame, but they used to commission paintings from artworks of themselves with their possessions in the back. So it was a description of like, this is my authority, this is my wealth. So even if you see like paintings of East India Company, or if you see paintings of kings, they have their wealth in the background, or there are velvet curtains, or there is, so this is what becomes your
signature.
It becomes affiliated to what oil painting is. And then over time it becomes something where the medium again gets meshed into what the message is. So watercolor, usually, like if you were to imagine watercolor, it's like a lot of very dreamy or ethereal kind of so you see a lot of illustrators on Instagram actually doing that. Like my friend Kaveri, she does a lot of work that feels very dreamy and playful and whimsical because she uses watercolor. Because watercolor is a very sort of a medium you can flirt with like that, So that adds to it, yes. The medium definitely. So if you're using material like paper also, that would like paper as with dimension, it will add to what you're doing. So it will add to the message. So definitely yes.
So I'm slightly hopping between your personal thing and the kind of work you're doing. Is like in Culture Shop, I believe you had given one quote, or I think it's on your website, I don't remember exactly, but your work is overall rooted in logic and common sense. So can you elaborate more on that, what it means?
So I put that in there because I think a lot of people approach illustrators. I'm not fully an illustrator. I do graphic design, I do visual art. I don't want to just remain limited to illustration because it doesn't make money, honestly. Otherwise, I would be pretty committed to illustration. But I think at a certain time in your career, you have to be like, okay, you've got to earn some money. So I think... anyway, what like my education in NID taught me that you should do your design deliberately with purpose and intention. So I think that gave me a very logical, rooted side, like a very left brain kind of approach to my work. Whereas on applied arts, it's a lot about school. Sorry, it's a lot about skills, not school. It's a lot about skill, and it's a lot about aesthetic, and it looks good. There is a purpose to it, but it's not as I would say rooted in logic as my approach from NID. So I think like when clients come to me, especially, I'll be like, I have both. I can tell you what is required for your brand because of from a strategy point of view.
Correct.
But I'm also not like I'm going to be like hardcore, like let's measure this intricately. And I'm not like that. I like the idea of evoking emotion in the person who's looking at your design work. I really want that. So it's not all about function, for me. It's about like
But still, it
form
takes
and function
detailing,
thing.
right? Like,
Oh yeah, definitely. It takes detailing. I think I meant to say like I won't be like 5 pixels here and I won't calculate things as much, but I do some of that. I think it's like I think I'm kind of like a cross between graphic design and illustration. Even my illustration style is kind of bordering on that. So I think I look at it that way at least.
yeah, the next one which I wanted to ask you is that I read your interview in My Creative Wall, where you mentioned design/art is kind of vague and cannot be learned from school or from a textbook. Can you also elaborate on that? What exactly did you want it to say?
Yeah, so I think that when you go to design school or even if you go to applied arts, a lot of your education isn't somebody sitting and showing you like a formula. It's not. I think most industries recognize and appreciate creativity, but in this case, no one can teach you to be creative. No one can teach you to feel what you're drawing. To feel a certain feeling when you're looking at something. No one can dictate that for you. So I think it's built on repeated exposure. Anyway, most learning is, but if you were to teach design or art to somebody, I think there's a lot of reliance on exposure and practice and the discipline of coming to it every day or engaging with other people's work or engaging with your own work, standing back, criticizing it. It's not like draw 10 circles until you get perfect at it and automatically people will then be like, oh, your design or art is good. It's not like that. It does require a lot of your own input. You cannot be passive. You have to be active in your own if you want to become, because creativity is valued more. You have to develop a voice, I think, more than anything. So I don't think it can be taught by teachers sitting in class. Even in NID, we used to have courses where they would push us out into like go to a village and then see what is going on and record your observations, because life is different there from what you're accustomed to. So that exposure changes you. It helps you reflect on, okay, I thought this was the only way things were done, but there are other ways to do it. So that opens up a multitude of possibilities. I think that much more perspective, yeah, and I think that's very important because. Even as a studio, you have all kinds of clients coming to you. So you need to be able to understand first their point of view and be empathetic to them. So that broadening of your perspective has to happen. And you also have to be able to implement several kinds of, for several kinds of clients, you have to implement design solutions. So I think, yeah, you just can't learn that in a classroom.
Yeah.
You really can't. Yeah. And I think it goes with most design industries. Like, the same thing can be said.
Yeah, makes sense completely. Yeah, and actually, this was the last question which I wanted to ask you, and which we also spoke about on the phone. So the question is like, how do you break boundaries of art and still be relevant? So I'll give you the context, which is there are certain artworks or artwork rather, which try and defy certain things. The traditional norms or whatever, like things, stuff like that, and or what we call as ahead of time, right? Yeah. So how can an artist break those barriers and defy and take a different path and go all out in creating something and still be relevant to the user. So like for me, at least when I go to art galleries or anywhere, I what I understand is the balance from my knowledge. So I just love it, or it's like I don't know what it is, right? But there are, yeah, but there are certain artwork, because this is very subjective form of art, right? So when you look at it, either you like it or you don't understand, or you don't like it. But then how do you make it likable, or how do you make it you completely express yourself, but still it communicates something to the audience, to the viewer.
So that, I think, is the difference between your last particular, that line that you said. How do you make it likable? Or like at least have meaning to the viewer, or make sense to the viewer. I think that's the difference between like fine art and like illustration or graphic design or something like that. That is the difference, because I can't speak as an authority on fine art at all, even though I do like work, I engage with people's work in fine art. But I think with fine art, if you know the background of the pieces, generally it tends to add, it's kind of like an acquired taste. Like, why does this whiskey taste better than that? Like, you know where it comes from, you know how it's made, all those things matter probably. So that's what I can say for fine art, because I'm not an authority on that. But I would say for illustration, it's a lot of understanding trends, for one. It's about understanding culture, but it's about understanding the mass, like what are people liking right now, what are people engaging with, and why. So I think like if you look now at all the kind of illustration coming out, as I said before, you see a lot of women-centric work. You're seeing a lot of for some reason, a lot of plants, because a lot of people have gotten to gardening recently. I think that could be because we are always in these spaces which are so shut and four walls, and that people have started appreciating, the beauty of plants. This is my take on it, but I try to understand it from that point of view. I think I have the same issue when I'm dealing with how to make a product that we want to sell. So, like I sell a lot of my products, my own products, which I produce and everything on Culture Shop. So there are t-shirts and things that I make. I make the artwork and Culture Shop produces them, but there are also things that I produce. So I basically have to figure out the material. I have to figure out from concept onwards whether people will be interested in something like this in the first place, and whether this is something that they would buy, And if I want to do something interesting in the design field, how do I tackle that and also make it viable for me to put it out, in the sense that how do I make money on this and also do something cool and new and unique. So like we did a zine last year called Unfolding the Sari, and I don't know if you've seen that. Have you seen that? Yeah, okay. So it's a zine in the shape of a sari, and I debuted it at the East London Comic Arts Festival, where I was like displaying my work with my collective Kadak, and I had to take a decision at that point that I have like 10 ideas. We always have a lot of ideas at the studio, and they're all in different stages of progression. But at some point, you have to figure out what will work, and what. Some are very ambitious projects, so you're like, let me get into that later. Let me figure out. You create tests into the market. You test something out. So Unfolding Sari is a bit of a test in a way to understand like whether people are attached to material. Okay, so I thought like I'm making it out of a really cheap paper. Like literally, the sheets we used were like 3 rupees per sheet. Okay, so I got 3 zines out of each sheet. So I only paid 1 rupee for the paper. I paid a lot of money for the hanger, but yeah, I paid only 1 rupee for each zine's paper. But it was trying to understand that is paper really valuable? Are you looking at something as a luxury item, or is it if I create it in such a novel format that you don't care what material it was created out of? You will be like, I love this because of what's printed on it. I love the way it's folded. I love the way it's presented. I love its content, and that overshadows what the material is. And the material actually becomes, because it was inspired by that cheap paper that you get on flyers in the bazaar, right? It was inspired by that. So how do I make that, which is considered cheap and tacky, how do I make it cool, So that's when I had to kind of engage with it. So I thought to myself that okay, there are lots of women who are interested in the sari, but they don't. Whenever we think of the sari, it's traditional and it's boring, and a lot of fashion magazines will do something wild to it. And I'm like, why don't we do? Yeah, it's like what your mom wears kind of thing, and people have been trying to contemporize it, but I thought this is a good way to do it ourselves. And the content within it also is challenging its tradition in a sense. Like, is the sari modest? Because that's what, like, Mother Teresa wore a sari, Indira Gandhi wore a sari, but it's also kind of very sexy, no? I mean, you have like Mandakini dancing in a wet sari in Bollywood songs, and men will always say like, "Oh, sari is the sexiest thing," and all that. So we present it in a way that it's relevant, I think, to younger audiences who will be like, "Wow, this is like this guerrilla zine where we are redefining what the sari is and what it means to women today." So it was an experiment in lots of ways. There was a lot of surprises along the way while making it. But I think that's what you have to get. You have to get the audience for it, and you have to understand what does this audience like and what do they want. So you have to kind of study trends all the time. So you see what people are doing. You can't let go of that. If you do that, then your practice is gone. You have to be aware of what people are doing.
But
you
then
have to
what
be aware
happens
of.
to like art for making art's sake?
So because I'm not an authority on that, I can say that it's way more niche. I think if you want to challenge the boundaries of what art is, you either I don't know how
Go in
to.
exile.
I don't know about that. But I think you can say what has become a rule, what has become an established norm. And if you are confident enough to think that I don't have to go by an established norm, and then you strike out and you have an idea to do something very, very differently, then yes, you can break those boundaries. But I think I can express it really well if I take an example of how modern design came about. If you see like art before like a century or 2 centuries ago, it was very ornamental, right? A lot of the book arts, everything, and I told you I can't speak on paintings and stuff like that, but a lot of the art was very ornamental. If you look at old books, there was ornament around it and all that. And then I think
even the furniture had a lot of.
Yeah, it was just like it's like all stuck onto something. Like there was a lot of ornamentation, and I love that work also. But I think this was really cool when people started thinking like, let's take away things, let's make it simpler, let's make it modern, and that's what modern graphic design is, like Swiss graphic design, the minimalistic idea. So like you strip away all the the beauty and the maybe a chair is ugly, let it be ugly, or let it not be something that has to blow your mind in the way it looks or the aesthetic. Let it be stripped down to its function. Which I think a lot of Charles Eames' work is quite like that. So I think around that time, somebody published a paper called "Ornament is Crime," something to that effect. So I thought it was interesting because they decided that ornament is not needed. And they went away with it. So this was like not one single artist, but multiple artists and designers started adopting that methodology. So I think it's like question an established norm. I think something else I was reading the other day again, which is a good argument for this, is like when Seinfeld, the comedy sitcom, came about. So earlier when you watched sitcoms, they were all about family sitcoms, if you notice. Like there's Full House or Silver Spoons or Different Strokes. I used to watch a lot of these growing up in the Gulf, And it was always a family situation,
Correct.
Or you'd call a sitcom by the name of their surname, like The Hogans or something like that. And somebody said, like, the Seinfeld was like, what if we just drop that one thing? We'll do a sitcom, but it won't be about a family. It'll be about adults. Adults meaning families with adults, but there will be no kids in this. It will not be about a family. And he drops that one thing, and that's how Seinfeld became such a big thing and paved the way for like comedies like Friends or where there are groups of young people and how they adjust to their lives, etc. I think the same can be said for a band like punk music, for example. So if you look at classic rock and all that, people used to, and I'm talking about this like as an analogy to art and illustration. But everybody used to do it a certain way. There was a focus on learning the guitar and playing it really well. And punk music was supposed to be democratic in that sense, is that you can't play like any chords on a guitar. Screw this, like, you know, that doesn't mean that you can't make music. Why should it mean that? Why should you have that entry level? You can see this also in outside in our art thing. You can see it in the art field. You can see it with outsider art. So these are people who aren't trained through like a fine art school or trained to
Academically.
yeah. In fact, even if you see schools of painting in history, they were schools. They taught you to paint in a certain style. It was kind of almost institutionalized that you must paint like this. Don't paint your own ideas. Don't paint your own feelings. But it takes a long time to figure out that this is what I think and I want to paint that, or this is what I think and I want to draw that. There's a Miles Davis quote also. He says, damn, it takes a really long time to sound like yourself. You know, I love that quote because it is so hard. It's so easy to look at everybody else's work and just, you know, copy and assimilate. But it's really hard to close off those inspiration. Now it's even become harder because there's something called Pinterest. But like Pinterest and Instagram, if you shut them off and you try to figure out what you want to do or how you want to do things, then it's
gonna take time.
It's gonna take time because you have to learn not to listen to other people. So I think that is maybe the answer you were looking for in the question.
The answer,
Okay, good.
Cool.
So I think that's the big thing.
Cool. I think we'll conclude with one last question. So, what are the next plans? What are you up to, and what can we see in
this is the fun part.
Yeah.
Of Studio Code. We are doing a lot of work with toys, and we're also like movable toys. You know, because India has a rich history of toys that move, dynamic toys. So we are looking to study these mechanisms. We've already done quite a bit of work in that department, but we are now finessing these products and putting them out there. So movable toys and toys that are interactive, because we also really like the notion of toy design. I've done some toys also in the past. That's one thing. Second thing is we'll be releasing a new website in a couple of months, which will also be featuring a new branding. So you'll see much more projects than we otherwise show. Thirdly, we're working on new zines also.
Sorry,
new zines. And we're working a lot on content. So these are larger zines than Unfolding the Sari, which was like a fold-out comic. But this will be like multiple pages and really, really quite research-led. So we're working on all these. And it's quite an exciting thing, actually. I'm quite excited about it.
Cool. I think, this is a good note to end this. Thanks, Meera, for giving your time, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Very nice to be here.
So that's it from today's Gyan session. Stay tuned for more Gyan on Audio Gyan next week. Till then, bye.